History of the Outlet. It is a great privilege this afternoon to meet with Jack Kinney. Jack has been a leader in the community for a long time. Jack, you were a teacher in the Decatur schools. You were a coach. You were a principal. And now you're on the park board and have been for over 20 years. So thank you for meeting with us today.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit. Let's go back in history and talk first about a little bit about your growing up. You didn't grow up in Decatur, but you grew up. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Covington, Indiana. It's just across the line from Danville, Illinois. Went to high school there.
And you were an athlete.
Well, yeah, in a small high school.
Yeah, but you played multiple sports.
Yeah. Interesting for you to know, probably, I'm one of 10 kids.
No kidding.
Yeah, I had 6 sisters and 3 brothers.
Wow. Where did you fit in the...
I was number 8.
Number 8. Okay,
yeah.
So you're near the end of the order.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so you had almost a baseball team in the family then.
Well, remember now, there were 6 girls.
Yeah.
And at that time, girls were not much in athletics.
Okay, that's the
time in life.
And then you went to Eastern, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And you meet your wife there.
Yes.
At Eastern, and I assume you were an athlete at Eastern as well.
Yes, I played basketball and baseball at Eastern.
So we'll come back to that, but and then what a lot of people don't know about you is that you played pro baseball for a couple of years.
Yes, I did that.
How did that happen?
Maybe I should say a couple of seasons.
A couple seasons. Okay. How did that happen?
Well, I had played baseball at Eastern, and I guess to say recruited, maybe, I'm not sure that's the right word, but it was sought by the Kansas City Athletics at that time. And when I graduated from college, I went out there for a tryout and was signed. Played that summer in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And that was at a time when the draft was still in effect for the U.S. Armed Services. And I got home in like September, and they were kind of knocking on my door. And I was trying to find a job. People wouldn't hire me because they knew I was probably going to get drafted. So I ended up enlisting in the Army. And spent about, I was being drafted for 2 years. Enlisted for 2 years. And then I got out after a couple of years of service and came back to baseball. I was somewhat successful in my first year, and in the meantime I got married to some cute babe that I knew, which only lasted 60 years.
Well, your wife is from Decatur,
yes.
Right? And you met at Eastern, and then you got married during or after your Army service?
Got married during my Army service.
Okay.
And she was still in college.
Okay.
And
at Eastern.
That is,
yeah.
And it wasn't exactly what her parents thought, was a good idea. Although they didn't argue with us or anything. Just, it's going to be difficult for you in the Army and her in college, and you won't end up graduating from college. And we said, oh, yes, she will. And she did.
Yeah.
It was important to me, and it was important to her that she go ahead and finish.
Yeah. So you made that work.
Yep.
But then you got out of the Army and you went back into minor league baseball.
Yes.
And that couldn't have been easy either.
Well, it wasn't. Because in the meantime, we found out that she was going to have a little one.
Okay.
And we were in Hot Springs, Arkansas, for that one session.
Yeah.
Well, the next a couple years later, I was in one town, and then they were having financial troubles, and I ended up in Mattoon.
Okay.
At my final year of professional baseball because I was interested in teaching. And that was the year that the new high schools were going to be opened in Decatur, Eisenhower and MacArthur.
Yeah, just to recap that, so Decatur had up to that time had one integrated high school, Decatur High School.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, with the baby boom generation coming on, the population expanding, the two new high schools, you mentioned MacArthur and Eisenhower opened.
Yes.
Is that when you came to Decatur High, or to the Decatur School District?
Yes. I came the year that the two new high schools were open.
Okay.
But I was at Stephen Decatur. I was a business teacher there, and baseball coach, and assistant basketball.
So was that easy that happened? Was it just, you just thought, obviously your wife was from Decatur. You had family here. Did that all happen all of a sudden? That you were all of a sudden now you're teaching and you're also coaching, right?
Right. Well, it was a challenge.
Yeah.
One that not unexpected. When they're opening two new high schools and you're hiring people, and it was for me. It was my first teaching job. Yeah, that was a challenge.
And you had a little baby by this time?
Well, the first year, teaching, we had a little one.
Yeah. So you had a lot going on at home and at work. One thing I want to get into a little bit is that were you teaching basketball then from year one, or coaching basketball?
I was going to say we were teaching, but we didn't call it that.
No, you were an assistant, right? Yeah, when you started off.
Yeah, and at that time, the assistant coaches, like in basketball, we started with the freshmen, stayed with that group of kids through their sophomore year, and then we start back over on that cycle, freshman, sophomore, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's the way it operated. And I think that was new to the system, by the way, because they didn't have but the one high school, and it was a 3-year high school.
Yeah. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time on this because I think it's important historically. Is that you were coaching? Pete Kintner was the head coach.
Oh yes.
At what was then Stephen Decatur High School, and Kintner, of course, was a very high-profile, was a famous name throughout the state of Illinois, and had won 3 championships for Decatur High School. So you were going into a very high-profile program.
Yes, sir.
So what was it like working with Gay Kintner?
Well, he pretty much let us do what we wanted to do in the way of coaching and what kind of offense or defense we ran. He didn't dictate to us, really.
Okay.
He was easy to work with.
Yeah.
And somewhat, at least in my case, I wasn't familiar with him. I grew up in Indiana, so his notoriety was a little bit oblivious to me until I got on the job and became aware of how much people respected him and for his coaching abilities. And when you win 3 state championships, people take note of that.
Yeah.
So I was, in the beginning, a little apprehensive about being in that job. But it worked out fine.
What was it like? What was he like as you watched him do his thing?
Well, as I say, he just let us pretty well on our own offense and defense. Which surprised me. I figured that when I came here, he would say, well, you're going to run this kind of a defense and this kind of offense, so on and so forth. And he did not dictate that at all.
So he delegated pretty much, largely, gave you the freedom to run your own program.
Yes. I think probably if we had not there were two assistant coaches. And if we had not been successful in what we were doing, or he thought we were not doing it right, I'm sure he'd have told us. Sure. But that did not happen.
So this was 1958, I believe. Is that right, Jack?
We came in 57.
You came in 57.
57, 58, 59.
Gotcha. So, 1960, very successful year for the basketball team, and a very tragic event happened in that during the MacArthur game, Gate Kittner passed away. But you were there. I mean, you were literally next to him as that happened. What are your recollections of that? Of that whole situation.
It was so sudden. I mean, he hadn't been sick or anything. And just bam, he had this heart attack, and he was gone.
Yeah.
And his wife and my wife were right behind us when this occurred, and some doctors came from the stands to assist, and my wife and his wife went to the hospital thinking that he was going to be taken there and admitted. Well, he was never taken to the hospital. And I recall that night was one when she and I got home, just with a little sleep. You just couldn't. You're so emotionally upset with that.
Yeah. Yeah. What a shocker.
Oh, yeah. And it was just disturbing.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's fault. It's just one of those things that happen. It's just, I had never been around where a person died when I was there.
Yeah.
And so it really shakes you up emotionally and mentally.
Sure. What was the feeling in the school after that happened?
Well, in the school itself, it pretty well carried on just as it had in the past. I mean, after a short period of time.
Yeah.
But the funeral was right in our gym at that time.
Yeah. And that's when it was renamed shortly after that, I guess, after Kittner?
I'll be honest about it, I'm not sure when it was named Kittner. It may have been before. I'm just not really sure about that. I wouldn't want to say that and then find out.
Sure.
Wait a minute.
Yeah. Well, and then the two assistants had to carry on with the program. It was a very successful team. You were going on to state, and the two of you had to carry it forward.
Well, yeah, they assigned John Snyder and me as co-coaches for the rest of that year, which is kind of an awkward situation. Who makes the decisions, you know?
Right.
Who's going to start, what kind of offense you run, or what if there's going to be any changes and that kind of thing. And I would have to say, as I look back at it, it went really, really well. We did not have, I can't recall any arguments about us or disagreements, but even like, we went on to the high school tournament, which was conducted in Huff Gym in Champaign at that time, and we were playing teams that we'd never seen or heard tell of. Well, I recall one night where we wanted to scout the team that we're going to be the winner of the team that was playing.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to keep the kids over there really late.
Yeah.
I brought the kids back home. John stayed and scouted that team.
Yeah.
So we worked those things out pretty well.
Yeah.
I look back at that and say, gosh, I can't believe we did that, but we did.
Yeah, you made it work.
And not on top of that, I was taking graduate courses.
Oh.
I had my bachelor's degree, and I was so
Crazy time. Yeah.
it was crazy time.
Yeah. And then, so that team went to the Final Four, did not win.
Right.
2 years later, you had another opportunity to go to state tournament.
I probably should back up and say, people, I don't know where this is going, but it should be understood that John was appointed the head coach the next year.
Yeah.
He'd been in the system a year longer than I had.
Right. He was a senior to you in the system. Yeah. So he became the head coach in '61, and you were still an assistant in '61, and then in '62. John was a head coach. He was still the assistant, and the team went again to the finals. So tell us a little bit about that season, I guess, because it was an amazing season.
Well, it was just a normal basketball season. We were winning. What else do you expect?
Yeah.
You know. And we just went through the ranks of beating this team and that team in the tournaments.
Yeah.
So we finally got to the final game. And as I say, that was in Huff Gym. It was an exciting time because you're just jammed together there. And recollection was the final game was neck and neck. Well, it started off with the other team leading, but eventually got down to where it was tied back and forth and that kind of thing. And it came down to a couple of free throws need to be made by Tim Barnes, and he made, as I recall, you're going back a lot of years here, right? Sure. As I recall, he missed one and made one. We were in the lead.
Yeah.
And one of the events that happened right toward the end of that game, a player from the opposite team was so shook up, he passed the ball to one of our players. He threw it to Jerry Hill.
Yeah.
Just unexpectedly. And it was right toward the end of the game, and at the end of the game, the kid laid on the floor and cried. And I felt sorry for that kid.
Yeah.
But because he was, kind of the goat of the group.
Yeah.
But I've talked. I still see some of those kids who are now in their 70s.
Yeah.
and Jerry Hill, I've talked to him about that. He said he just didn't. He didn't want to duck or catch that ball when the kid threw it at him. And then when the game was over, the kid laid on the floor and cried. I said, it was just, you had to feel badly for him. I mean, you want to win, but when you make that kind of a mistake and it's so obvious,
it's a very public mistake.
Yeah.
Decatur, Stephen Decatur High School at that time was not, the high schools have been divided up, so it was not not within the tiers of the largest high schools in the state at that time. Were you guys at all intimidated by the fact that you were going to be, you're going to be playing these big Chicago schools?
Not really. At the time, they weren't that big a name.
Yeah.
They didn't have a lot of reputation behind them, and some of them, the enrollment was pretty big, but they just hadn't been pushed like they have in recent years.
It hadn't been translated to a big advantage yet. And of course, Decatur had a tradition of being a championship school.
Yeah, won 3 state championships.
Yeah.
Not that I don't want anybody to interpret. I'm saying we had anything to do with it because both coaches were fairly new to the Decatur system.
But the bottom line was that in 1962, Stephen Decatur High School became the first program to win 4 state championships at that time. That was a huge deal. So after you won, what was that like?
Well, when you say after we won, I'm talking about now. We win and we come back to Kentner Gym.
Yeah.
We were in a bus, and as we came this direction from Champaign, we picked up some following. So when we got to Decatur, we came back to Kentner Gym, unload and so on, and it was a massive crowd.
Really?
Yeah. The gym was full.
Wow.
At least that's the way I remember.
Wow. So the communities come out.
Oh, yeah.
So what happened?
You know, it's a little hard for me to remember what all did go on.
Yeah. But here's the community that's built the gym.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know what all we did there.
Yeah.
You know, it's not something you think about.
Right. It wasn't planned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are we going to do when we win this tournament? We'll come back to Kintner Gym and we'll just do this and that and the other. Well, no, it didn't work that way.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a blur for me, frankly.
Sure. Well, it had to be a really emotional high at that point as well.
Because now, at that time, see, I was the assistant.
Yeah.
But we'd worked together for several years. It wasn't like dealing with somebody you don't know.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case at all. And, you know, I had coached those kids, freshmen, sophomores, know the kids pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, just this past weekend, those kids were together.
Yeah, those 70-year-old kids, right?
Yeah, were you aware of
I was aware. Yeah. Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
How do you think that event influenced the lives of that group?
Well, I don't know necessarily that event caused it, but this event that just happened this last weekend, we finally got out that these kids have all graduated from college. All of those players.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I was aware that this kid had graduated and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I didn't think about putting it all together and saying, well, they all graduated from college.
Yeah.
And some of them with master's degrees.
Yeah.
One of them a doctor.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a story that's pretty hard to beat.
Yeah, that's a story into itself, I guess.
Yes, it is.
So that was quite a high, and then John went on to a job the next year in the Chicago suburbs, and you became the head coach. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, in the program.
Yeah.
And you coached for a number of years. How was that? How was that experience different from being the assistant and going into it?
Well, not a lot different. I mean, you know, you're dealing with the same kind of kids. Some of them, that first year that I was a head coach, I coached several of those kids and got through the ranks.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seemed pretty natural to me.
Yeah.
At that time, we were still in Kintner Gym.
Yeah.
When I took over, and that was, just playing in Kintner Gym was an impressive experience.
Kintner was larger than my understanding is larger than Huff Gym, where you go to at the University of Illinois.
Well, I don't know that. I'm not sure that's true.
I've read that. I don't know, so I can't verify it.
Because I wasn't very familiar with Huff Gym.
Yeah.
Just when we played there, so Kintner Gym was at that time was one of the exceptional high school gyms in the state.
Yeah.
And the crowds were just full house most of the time.
Yeah.
Which was a very good experience.
Yeah. So you were teaching business, you were coaching basketball, at least for some years you coached baseball as well, right? And then after, I guess, around a decade of teaching, I didn't know this about you, but you made a shift into the Kyle building, and you worked in purchasing for the district. That's a pretty big job change, going from teaching to all of a sudden you're kind of in the business side of the district. How did you like that?
Well, I thought it was a good experience. The amount of time I was there, it could have been extended.
Yeah.
You know, a year and a half or 2 years. There's a lot to be learned. But no, I like that job, but I like the coaching job and the teaching job and the principal's job also.
Yeah. So you got to learn a different side of the school district operation there.
Well, my experience in the purchasing side of it was helpful, also from a principal standpoint.
Sure.
You know, you have to know a little more about the background that some principals don't have that experience for.
Yeah, you saw kind of how things worked at the headquarters at the Kyle building.
Kind of behind the scenes, almost.
Yeah. And so you did that for several years, I guess.
You mean which?
The purchasing. Yeah.
I was on there about a year and a half.
Oh, a year and a half, so not very long.
No.
And then kind of unexpectedly, you were asked to move into the principal's position at Lakeview.
Yes.
And that was in, I guess, the early 70s. And so you were an unknown quantity when you started mid-year, January at Lakeview. You were unknown to the teachers. You yourself had no experience as a principal, so you were kind of on a new learning curve. How did you deal with all that?
Well, sometimes it was challenging. For one thing, the staff was not very pleased with me being out there. They were not happy to lose the principal. And it wasn't something that I caused or I had anything to do with. And but for the most part, it went okay.
Yeah.
But I had that same experience coming back to Decatur High.
Yeah. So a few years later, I guess you were the principal during the 74-75 school year at the old school.
At the old school.
Yes. Again, a job you didn't apply for, but you were asked to take on.
Yes.
Was that a similar situation where you're going in and
well, to complicate that, as I say, was when the Lakeview was damaged by that railroad yard explosion.
Right. Yeah.
To the point that the building could not be used, and so there was two of us school in the same building, and both of us new principals.
Yeah.
Bob Matheson was the other principal.
And he was new as well.
Yes.
Oh. Well, yeah.
So here we are, two new principals. Well, I've been a principal for 4 years, something like that. But it was his first experience in a new foreign building. It's been divided. We're going in the morning and he's going in the afternoon. The Lakeview school was there in the afternoon. She came in, as I recall, about 12:30.
Yeah.
And we got out at about 12.
Yeah.
It's not the kind of thing that you would necessarily want to have.
No, definitely not an ideal circumstance.
But we both succeeded without a whole lot of problems.
How did you plan that out? I mean, you didn't have a lot of time to figure that out, right? Because the railroad yard exploded. Lakeview was catastrophically damaged, and you just had to, all of a sudden, I don't know how many months you had to come up with a plan, but
About 6 weeks or
6 weeks, so it wasn't a lot of time.
Usually during that time there's some exchange or change of staff.
Yeah, right.
Just naturally.
Yeah.
Then it just explosion.
Yeah.
But the timing was very went to noon, basically, and they came in at 12:30, overlap there, and you're concerned that the kids might or might not get along, or the staff might or might not get along, because they're using the same rooms.
Right. Yeah.
It's certainly not ideal, but what do you do in those situations?
Yeah.
And you talk, if you talk to the kids who went to school at that time, I think they felt like it was okay.
Yeah, well, I was there. I thought it was a good deal. Of course, I thought Stephen Decatur had the better shift to go early and be done at noon, but then again, we didn't have all the administrative hassles of figuring out how to make that work. We were just going through it.
Well, and the other thing along with that, the teachers are sharing classrooms. You're there in the morning and I'm there in the afternoon, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And sometimes, well, what'd you do with my this or that?
Yeah.
But in retrospect, I thought it went pretty well.
Yeah, I as a student, I can't recall any real hassles, but I'm sure there were some.
Very few.
And then, right after that, the decision was made to the following year go out to the new school, the new Stephen Decatur building. So no sooner had you sort of figured out how to get through that year than you were off to the new building. Now, that must have presented a number of unique challenges.
But some of that happens so quick and so, I started to say often. It does happen. It happened frequently there because our building wasn't completely operational.
Yeah.
And well, just for me personally, I'm living in South Shores, and that's clear across town.
Yeah.
And you have meetings, you have dances, you have all kinds of things that are going on in the evenings. So it's a real challenge, just time-wise. I don't think the public has any idea about that, really.
Yeah. And then you had all the teething pains of having a brand new building. I mean, it was just a completely different kind of building than the old school. I mean, it had all these fun, nice features. It had air conditioned and all that kind of stuff, but were there any particular problems with the building itself that first year?
Well, some of the air conditioning units, the control for this room was in that room over there. And so it was hot in here, so they're trying to turn it down, and it was affecting the room over there.
So it took a while to figure out what was controlling what.
What? It's cold in here. And I turned it down. But it didn't get the room next door. That was pretty common in that building.
Yeah.
In the academic part of it.
Yeah.
And we didn't realize what had happened for a while. But the control in one room was controlling what was going on in another one. And vice versa. Yeah, that was interesting.
Well, that turned into a good long run for you. Then as principal of Stephen Decatur, you were there then from the mid-70s until your retirement in the early 90s. So you got to see a couple of decades of classes go through.
And there's a side issue here in that new building.
Yeah.
Well, there's somebody here who might be aware of this. That, like the band room, if you went into the band room, you went down a slope.
Yeah.
And in the music room, you went down a slope to get in there.
Yeah.
And in the industrial arts area, you went down a slope to get in the classroom. You know why it was like that?
No.
Well, the building was well under construction. And my father-in-law, who's in industrial arts guy who was in the Kyle building in administrative role. He went out to visit, and he said, "You can't have ceilings like that. You know, the top row in a band room." Well, they couldn't raise the ceiling, so they lowered the walls.
Oh, no kidding. So that was kind of on the fly then.
Oh, absolutely. And it was in both those areas, in music and industrial arts.
Okay. Well, it's a good thing he got involved in that when he did then.
Yes.
Right.
But you can recall that. Well, you may not have known at the time what the reasoning was, but I had little or no input into what was going into that building or how it went.
Yeah.
Because it was well under construction before I was ever appointed the principal.
Yeah.
And the people in the old building didn't have a lot of say what was going into that new the board and the people in the Kyle building were doing that.
Yeah. How did things change over the decades then, as you were there? Was there a big evolution in the schools during that period?
Not quite sure what you mean by evolution.
Just over the decades was, and then maybe there wasn't. Between the mid '70s and '92. Of course, you were gaining experience. You went from being a relatively new principal when you started to being very experienced principal by the end. Did it get a lot easier as time went on?
Oh, a little maybe, but pretty much the same.
Yeah.
From one year to the next, you have this kind of a problem, and the next year it's this kind of a problem.
Yeah.
Some things that are kind of minor that get to be a pain in the neck. Having dance after a basketball game, or dance after a football game, or events in the music field when they're having programs at night.
Yeah.
And in our auditorium, that was kind of unusual. And the ground level, so to speak, it was lowered about two or 3 feet. The floor was.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that happened. I don't know whether it was just part of the plan, I guess. As you pointed out, I didn't have any input into that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Until kind of after the fact. No, I thought things there wasn't enough restroom space in it. That caused some problems from time to time. And that's true in the locker rooms too.
What was there generally around 1,000, 1,200 students, somewhere in that range during that period?
It started out about 1,600.
1,600, okay. Yes.
And over the years, our enrollment has gone down some.
Yeah. And then it wasn't long, I guess, within a year after you retired, you and your wife discussed it, and you decided to run for the park board.
Mm-hmm.
And
within a year.
Within a year, yeah.
In fact, I retired in about in June, somewhere along in there, and then the board election came up in the fall, and I made that decision.
So you've been on the park board now as long as you were a principal. So you've had really a kind of a second career in retirement. In leadership of the park board. What's that been like?
Well, there's controversial things there, too.
Sure.
But one thing about it, for the most part, as a park board member, you don't have near the pressure or concern you do have as a principal.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's been good.
Yeah.
Particularly the last 3 years, all that's gone on in the park district.
Yeah.
I mean, as a whole, the local music program, the new facilities out at Nelson Park.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gone to those events at the amphitheater. You wonder in the beginning how people going to deal with this, how they're going to react. And it's just been over the top.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I don't get any rights or complaints.
Yeah.
I don't hear anybody who goes to that who doesn't think it's just wonderful.
Yeah, they have a lot of satisfaction from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As if I had a lot to do with it, you know. But it's well done. The zoo train, I don't know if you're aware of that, but it has, are you all familiar with the zoo train? Yeah. Well, it used to just kind of go around like this, and now it's twice as long.
Yeah.
Go over in front of the Children's Museum.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's a cooperative thing. The Children's Museum is located on Park District property.
Yeah.
But we don't own the building.
Yeah.
I talked to the gal who's running that now, and she couldn't be happier.
Yeah. You have a number of cooperative ventures like that, right, on Park District property, where you own the property or the building, and it's run by another.
Well, it's kind of used, well, like what used to be the Cadillac garage. Well, that was donated to the Park District, and now it's used as a vocal music practice area. And it's not exactly what we'd like to have, but it's a whole lot better than what we did have.
Yeah.
And the gal who runs that, she really runs it.
Yeah.
She's really good.
Yeah. Well, these are important assets for the community. And, you know, the park board, you know, you're really stewards of those assets.
Well, and, you know, out of Fairview Park, that facility.
Yeah.
They've done a really good job with that. And I think the out at Nelson Park where the slides and swimming pool, that's all but 99% done. It's not going to open up. I don't think we're going to have it open this fall. We're going to wait till next spring. When everything, try and get all the bugs worked out of it, so when it's open, it'll be big time.
Yeah, that'll be another big addition to the portfolio.
Golf, miniature golf out there. Your guy can tell really well. It's just, I look at that and say, how would you like to be the head of that? The whole operation, Bill Clevenger.
Yeah, that's complicated.
He's done a great job.
Yeah. Well, Jack, I want to thank you so much for your leadership in the community over the decades, as in the school district and now in the park district. So it's been a pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you very much. Signing off for the History of the Heartland.